Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about Frankenstein, chapters 1 through 5 of Volume 2. Volume 1 of the novel focuses on the role of the creator, Victor. Volume 2 focuses on the experience of the creature. In what I think is one of the most fascinating passages in the novel, or in any work of literature, the creature tells Victor about how he came to consciousness and self-consciousness, and an understanding of human beings and human society. Like Volume 1, Volume 2 is a rich text filled with complex ideas we could spend many classes discussing. But two ideas relevant to the first volume of the novel, and also to our discussion of Macbeth, should strike you right away. In Volume 2, as I said, the creature tells Victor about how he came to know himself and others. Volume 2 explores language and knowledge. Let's consider Volume 2's exploration of language first. Victor and the creature meet on a vast sheet of ice, and the creature makes a request. Listen to my tale. This should remind you of something right away. How did this novel begin? Captain Walton met Victor on a vast sheet of ice, and Victor told him his tale. The structure of the novel replicates. Now we're listening to another individual telling his story. A lot is at stake in communication. Victor tells the captain his story in the hope that the captain will learn something about his own ambition. The creature tells Victor, "The sun is yet high in the heavens. Before it descends to hide itself behind yon snowy precipices and illuminate another world, you will have heard my story and can decide. On you it rests whether I quit forever the neighborhood of man and lead a harmless life, or become the scourge of your fellow creatures and the author of your own speedy ruin." The creature tells Victor his fate and Victor's own fate rest on Victor's response to the story the creature is going to tell. Language is an attempt to overcome the gap between two different minds, two different sets of experience, two different beings. That gap might be very wide. The attempt to cross it through words might succeed, it might fail, it's a risk. But the course this creature's life takes depends on this risk. The creature's fate depends on whether he can make himself understood to Victor. We actually see this narrative structure of someone trying to make himself understood to someone else replicate itself a third time. While the creature is hiding in the hovel next to the cottager's house, watching them through the window, he begins to learn their language, and as he tells Victor, "I applied my whole mind to the endeavor, for I easily perceived that, although I eagerly longed to discover myself to the cottagers, I ought not to make the attempt until I had first become master of their language, which knowledge might enable me to make them overlook the deformity of my figure. For with this also the contrast perpetually presented to my eyes had made me acquainted." The creature knows he does not look like the cottagers. He knows his appearance will horrify them. His only hope is that he will be able to get them to listen to him speak, to get them to understand his inner life in spite of his outer appearance through words. He is hopeful. I formed in my imagination 1,000 pictures of presenting myself to them and their reception of me. I imagined that they would be disgusted until, by my gentle demeanor and conciliating words, I should first win their favor and afterwards their love. But words are his only hope. Whenever he presents himself to the cottagers, every word is going to matter. One wrong word and he will not establish a connection. That's also the situation the creature is in with Victor as he tells Victor his story. That's also the situation Victor is in as he tells the captain his story. That's the situation the captain is in as he writes letters to his sister. And that's the situation Mary Shelley is in as she tries to convey something to you through her novel. One of the things words convey is knowledge, the other major theme of this volume of the novel. There's an interesting connection in this novel between knowledge and light. Images of light play throughout this book, and light seems to have at least a symbolic association with knowledge, though maybe also a more literal one. The creature's first experience of the world, his first knowledge of the world, is light. By degrees, I remember, a stronger light pressed upon my nerves, so that I was obliged to shut my eyes. Darkness then came over me and troubled me. But hardly had I felt this when, by opening my eyes, as I now suppose, the light poured in upon me again. The light quickly becomes painful. It presses on his nerves so that he has to shut his eyes. But then, in contrast to the light, darkness is suddenly painful. It troubles him. Light introduces him to the world and also to distinctions in the world. Distinctions between light and darkness, and pleasure and pain. Light is literally light in this scene, but it's also literally knowledge, or a kind of knowledge, or at least the first kind of knowledge. The creature's initial knowledge that distinct, different things exist in the world. Light continues to play this role throughout the first days of the creature's life. Light gives him a sense of physical space itself, as he notes. I felt light, and hunger, and thirst, and darkness. Innumerable sounds rung in my ears, and on all sides various scents saluted me. The only object that I could distinguish was the bright moon, and I fixed my eyes on that with pleasure. The bright moon, a source of light, is like his first coordinate, his first indication that he exists as a separate individual at a distance from another thing. And light teaches him that each single object in the world has several distinct different qualities. One day, when I was oppressed by cold, I found a fire which had been left by some wandering beggars, and was overcome with delight at the warmth I experienced from it. In my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, but quickly drew it out again with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause should produce such opposite effects. Gradually, over time, light traces out for the creature all the basics and all the complexities of the world he has entered. Light is also the first form of technology he encounters, his first indication that human beings can to an extent control the natural world, that human beings have developed certain skills and powers. As he first watches through the window of the cottage, night quickly shut in, but to my extreme wonder, I found that the cottagers had a means of prolonging light by the use of tapers, and was delighted to find that the setting of the sun did not put an end to the pleasure I experienced in watching my human neighbors. It's significant, I think, that all that the creature learns about human beings, all the knowledge he now acquires about them, comes to him by watching through a lit window. Light and knowledge remain in this close relationship in the novel. They're one and the same thing, identical on a symbolic level and also almost on a literal one. Now, as he watches through the bright window and listens and begins to learn language, knowledge begins to come to the creature through words. He hears the cottagers reading books of history out loud. And the knowledge he acquires in this way has the same paradoxical qualities of the fire he encountered earlier. Written knowledge, like the fire, produces pleasure and pain. These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man, indeed, at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. The knowledge the creature receives as he listens to the words of these works of history tells him that human beings are wonderful and terrible, kind and violent, generous and selfish, essentially good and evil. This knowledge also makes clear to the creature the difference between himself and human beings. The words induced me to turn towards myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent united with riches. A man might be respected with only one of these acquisitions, But without either, he was considered, except in very rare instances, as a vagabond and a slave, doomed to waste his powers for the profit of the chosen few. And what was I? Of my creation and creator, I was absolutely ignorant. But I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was, besides, endowed with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as men. I was more agile than they, and could subsist upon coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I then a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled, and whom all men disowned? The knowledge that comes to the creature through these words makes the creature aware that other people exist and what those other people are like. But it also makes the creature aware that he is not like those other people. Language, which communicates knowledge, connects different beings, but at the same time reveals the differences between those beings. It allows two beings to communicate, but it also draws distinctions between those two beings. It's me telling you my experience and you telling me yours, and both of us coming to realize that our experiences are not quite the same. In this realization is the real peril in this novel. The novel is structured on a series of conversations. Walton writing to his sister, Victor speaking to Walton, the creature speaking to Victor, the creature preparing to speak to the cottagers. What is going to happen to all of these people depends on whether, when they speak to each other, they are going to be able to understand each other, to come through words to know each other.